So I was looking at some economic data yesterday, and I stumbled on a number that, honestly, it just didn't make any sense to me. It felt like a glitch.
Oh, I love a good data mystery. What was it?
It was a valuation of services, labor,
Yeah.
basically, that was contributed in the U.S. way back in 2012, and the number was $175 billion.
Whoa. Okay, that is a massive number.
Right. I mean, that's bigger than the entire GDP of countries like Hungary. But here's the kicker. That entire 175 billion was from a workforce that wasn't paid. Not a single cent.
Ah, okay. I
Right.
think I see where this is going. You're talking about the hidden economy of volunteering.
Exactly. But volunteering just feels like such a small word for something that has the economic weight of a whole country.
Yeah.
We picture, bake sales or someone handing out flyers on a Saturday.
Right.
But if it's generating hundreds of billions of dollars, then we are clearly missing something big.
We absolutely are. And frankly, looking at it just through money is probably the least interesting part. When you really dig into the sources we're looking at today, the history, the sociology, the case studies, you realize volunteering is this really complex engine.
Hmm.
It powers human longevity, it builds political capital, and sometimes, well, it can do more harm than good.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to figure out how we got from, military service to picking up trash while jogging, which is a thing, apparently.
It is a thing.
And we have to tackle the dark side. Because I was really surprised to learn how controversial doing good can actually be.
Oh, it's incredibly controversial. But before we get there, we need a baseline. So if I ask you to define volunteer, what's your first thought?
Someone who chooses to work for free, to help people, usually.
That's the modern idea, yeah. The core is freely chosen and unpaid. But if you went back in time, say to the year 1600, and told someone you were a volunteer, they would not think you were working in a soup kitchen.
No.
They'd hand you a musket.
A musket. So volunteering was a military thing.
Strictly military, yeah. The word itself comes from Middle French, volontaire, around the 1600s, and it specifically meant one who offers himself for military service.
So not about charity at all. It was about war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was to separate the guy who signed up to fight from the guy who was, drafted. And here's the detail that usually gets people. Those original volunteers, they were usually paid.
Wait, what? So the original volunteers got a paycheck?
They did. The working for free part wasn't really the point. It was all about the choice to serve. This whole idea of unpaid charitable work is a much, much more recent invention.
Okay, so how did we get from I volunteer to fight to
Yeah.
I volunteer to, I don't know, save the whales?
It was a slow process, but the 19th century was really the turning point. In the U.S., you had the Great Awakening, this huge religious and social movement where people started to feel this moral duty to help the disadvantaged, the poor orphans, the enslaved.
I'm guessing the Civil War just poured gasoline on that fire, right?
Yeah.
You can't draft people to make bandages.
That's a perfect way to put it. You had women volunteering to sew uniforms. You had groups managing supplies. And that's where you get people like Clara Barton. They called her the angel of the battlefield.
The Red Cross.
Exactly. She mobilized these huge volunteer efforts that eventually became the American Red Cross in 1881. And that was the moment it really became about humanitarian aid.
And then the 20th century just sort of, institutionalized it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You get the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, and then by the 1960s with, JFK and Johnson, it becomes part of government strategy, the Peace Corps, the war on poverty. Suddenly, volunteering wasn't just a nice thing to do, it was a pillar of society.
But let's fast forward to now, because the way we do it today is getting weird. In a good way. I mean, technology has just completely shattered the old model.
Oh, absolutely. We have totally entered the age of virtual volunteering.
Which, I have to say, sounds like a contradiction. How do you serve soup over Wi-Fi?
Well, you don't serve soup. You serve data. Think about Wikipedia.
Okay, right. I use it every day.
Yeah?
I never think of it as a charity.
But it is. It's one of the biggest volunteer projects in human history. You have thousands of people, all unpaid, at their computers, editing articles, checking sources, building a free knowledge base for the entire world. That is e-volunteering on a massive scale.
That's wild when you put it that way.
Yeah.
And I read about this other idea, micro-volunteering. This is the one that really spoke to me.
It's the gig economy version of doing good. It
Yeah.
just lowers the barrier to entry so much. In the old days, you had to apply, get screened, do training, commit to a schedule.
Right.
With micro-volunteering, if you have 10 minutes waiting for the bus, you can pull out your phone and, help a researcher classify images of galaxies.
So it's the Uberification of altruism. No commitment, just
Right.
action.
Exactly. But this brings up a really important economic point that ties back to your $175 billion number. Not all volunteer hours are, created equal.
What do you mean by that? An hour is an hour, isn't it?
Yeah. To a clock, yes, but not to an economist. The independent sector, they track this stuff, and they value a standard volunteer hour at around, let's say, $18 to $20.
Okay.
But there is a huge gap when you start talking about skills-based volunteering.
So that's when you use your professional skills, but for free.
Right. If you're a doctor or a lawyer or a coder and you donate your professional time, the value just skyrockets. We're talking an average of $220 an hour.
Wow, that is a huge multiplier.
It is, and it should change how nonprofits think.
Yeah.
If I'm running a charity and I have a volunteer who's a top web developer and I ask them to come paint a fence,
Right.
I am just wasting thousands of dollars of potential value.
Because you could pay a painter $50, but that developer could have built you a $5,000 website.
Exactly. It's an efficiency problem. We tend to treat all volunteers as this kind of generic labor, but the real power is in leveraging specific skills.
Okay, that's the economics. But let's get into the human side of it.
Yeah.
The stats are one thing, but the stories in these sources were surprisingly powerful. You mentioned something earlier, plogging. I still think you made that
I
up.
wish I was that clever. No, it's a Swedish term. It combines jogging with plocka up.
Which means
Pick up.
pluck.
Mm-hmm.
But you run and you carry trash. That sounds awful. I mean, running is hard enough.
I know, it sounds like a chore. But listen to this story about Giovanni from the UK. He's a teenager, and he started a plogging group just to clean up his local beach. Standard stuff, right?
Right.
But because they were physically there week after week, they started noticing the water in the river looked wrong.
Wrong how?
Discolored. It smelled bad. So they got a science teacher to help them test it, and they found significant chemical pollution.
Whoa. So this wasn't just like sandwich wrappers.
No, this was industrial runoff. So Giovanni and his little group of joggers, they gathered all this evidence, they went to the local paper, and they raised enough of a stink that the factory responsible actually admitted it and stopped the pollution.
That is incredible. And if they'd just been, donating money online, they never would have even seen the river.
Exactly. Being physically present turns you into a kind of a monitoring system.
And there was that other case study that stuck with me. Marcus in the U.S. He volunteers at a shelter for abandoned horses and donkeys.
To Gentle Barn, I think.
That's the one. And what struck me wasn't just his love for animals. It was what he said about the physical work. He's shoveling manure, carrying hay. It's exhausting stuff. But he said, moving my body gives me more energy.
That's such a common paradox in volunteering. We think of it as, spending energy like a battery draining down. But for so many people, like Marcus, it's a generator. It's regenerative.
And then you have the complete opposite with Robin in the rural UK. She's not moving hay bales. She's basically stuck at home.
Yeah, Robin's story is really about that loneliness epidemic we hear so much about. She lives somewhere where her nearest neighbor is a kilometer away, super isolated.
So what does she do?
She started volunteering online to teach math.
Math. That's a tough subject to volunteer for.
Well, she loves it. She teaches measurements and division to people all over the world just over video. And she said that while she's helping them, the real benefit is for her. It breaks our isolation. It's her window to the world.
And this all connects back to the hard medical data, doesn't it? Because we hear volunteering is good for the soul, but it seems like it's actually good for your arteries.
It is medically good for you. The data is shockingly strong. There are studies showing that volunteers over the age of 65 have significantly reduced mortality risks.
So it literally helps you live longer.
It seems to, and it's a major buffer against depression. There's this psychological thing called the helper's high. Doing good releases endorphins, and get this. Helping others is often more beneficial for your mental health than receiving help is.
I remember reading about that study from the Christchurch earthquake back in 2011.
Yes, in New Zealand. After that disaster, there was this huge surge in volunteering, obviously. Researchers studied the community afterward and found that the social connections of the social capital that were built during that cleanup were so powerful that they suggested doctors should literally prescribe volunteering.
So instead of a pill, you get a prescription to go help your neighbor fix their fence.
It kind of makes sense. We're social creatures. We fall apart when we don't feel needed.
Okay, so far, this sounds like a miracle cure. It saves the economy, saves the planet, makes you live longer. But, we promised a deep dive, and that means looking for the problems. Is there any reason not to volunteer?
Oh, we have to be skeptical. There's a very real and sometimes very dark side to this whole industry. And the biggest example is probably volunteerism.
Ugh. I see this on social media all the time. The student on their gap year posing with a bunch of smiling children in a developing nation.
It looks wonderful on Instagram, but under the surface, it can be incredibly destructive. There's a name for it. The savior complex.
That sounds bad.
It is. You have unqualified teenagers flying into countries to build schools, or even worse, provide medical care they are not trained for. We call it medical volunteerism, and it is so dangerous. But it also destroys the local economy.
How does it destroy the economy?
Well, imagine you're a local builder in that village. You're trying to make a living, and then a busload of, say, Americans shows up and offers to build that school for free.
And you just lost your job.
You can't compete with free.
So the volunteers are basically scabs. They're strike breakers who don't even know it.
In a way, yes. There was this famous speech by the philosopher Ivan Illich in the 60s. He gave it to some American students heading to Mexico, and the title of his speech was, "To Hell with Good Intentions."
Wow. He did not pull any punches.
Not at all. He told them their altruism was actually an insult. He argued it was just an extension of colonialism, this idea that we, the wealthy, know what's best for you. He basically said, stay home. You're treating the world like a playground for your own ego.
That's a brutal reality check. And it's not just an international problem, right? Labor unions here have issues with it too.
For the exact same reason. If a job can be done by a paid employee, but a nonprofit uses a volunteer to save money, they are suppressing wages. They are getting around minimum wage laws.
And it creates this gatekeeping system. I think they call it volunteer credentialism.
Yes. Think about really competitive fields like media or NGOs or the arts. They often expect you to do these unpaid internships or volunteer gigs to even get considered.
Which is fine if your parents can pay your rent.
Exactly. If you need to work to eat, you can't afford to work for free for 6 months, so entire careers get closed off to working class people. And volunteering, this thing that's supposed to be so democratic, becomes a luxury good, a club for the privileged.
That is a depressing twist. So how do we square this? We have the helpers high on one side and economic exploitation on the other.
I think we have to look at the philosophy of why we're doing it. We have to move away from the resume building mindset and look at something older.
You mentioned the concept of seva in the notes.
Yes, seva. It's a concept from Hinduism and Sikhism, and it means selfless service.
But true selflessness is hard.
It is. But in Sikhism, seva is a form of worship. You do it without any thought of reward or recognition or even spiritual credit. It's about dissolving your own ego. If you're volunteering so you can post about it on LinkedIn, it is not seva.
That's a pretty good test.
And there's this fascinating sociological layer to it, too. A study by Zhu and Ngai on NGOs in China came up with this idea of moral resources.
Okay, moral resources. Break that down for me. What does that actually mean?
Think of it like a power source for an organization. They found 2 types. Moral resource I is internal. It's that gut check confidence an organization has because they truly believe what they're doing is right.
So that keeps them going.
Right. But moral resource 2 is external. It's their reputation. It's street cred. Because society generally sees helping people as a good thing, these volunteer groups have a very high level of public trust.
And trust is a kind of currency.
Exactly. And this is where it gets political. Because these groups have those moral resources, they gain political capital. They can operate in places where the government is maybe failing or where other businesses aren't trusted.
So volunteering isn't just being nice, it's a power structure. It builds an alternate infrastructure.
Yes. But that leads us to the final really big tension, the volunteer versus the state.
We saw that with Hurricane Sandy in New York. The government was just overwhelmed, and this group, Occupy Sandy, they just took over.
They did. It was this amazing volunteer-run response. They used social media to move supplies and generators faster than FEMA could. It was pure mutualism.
But it raises a scary question. If volunteers get that good at it, does the government just stop trying?
That is the ultimate danger. You had politicians like David Cameron in the UK who wanted to make volunteering mandatory. But if the government starts relying on volunteers to fight fires, which they do in a lot of the US, or to staff libraries, are we just letting the state off the hook?
It's a really slippery slope. I mean, if I have to volunteer because the local fire department was defunded, am I really a volunteer anymore? Or am I just an unpaid government worker?
And that's the question I want to leave everyone with. We've talked about how volunteering builds political capital, but if it becomes something we're forced to do, either by law or just because basic services have collapsed, does it lose that moral resource?
Does it stop being seva and just become servitude?
Precisely. At what point does the free choice disappear? Because once that choice is gone, I think all the magic is gone too.
That is a lot to think about. We went from muskets to mandatory labor in like 15 minutes. But I guess that's why this deep dive is so important. You can't just look at the bake sale and smile. You have to look at the entire machine behind it.
Absolutely. Thinking critically doesn't mean you stop helping. It just means you help smarter.
Well, on that note, we want to thank you for volunteering your time to listen to us today. We know you have a choice.
And we promise we won't make you pick up any litter while you do it, unless, you want to.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, here's our selfish ask. Volunteer just a split second of your time to hit that like button. It really helps us a ton.
And share this with a friend, especially anyone who's thinking about voluntourism. Maybe send them this before they book that flight.
And of course, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.